And I think we'll get started. Good afternoon. I always say good morning, but I actually said good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, which is how to stay cyber safe. And we're really excited to have him with us today, who's going to be doing the presentation. So we're really excited. Like I said, and apologies for those of you that I'm repeating myself to. I just want to make sure I'm getting to the attendees that joined us a little bit later. We can see you and hear you. I would ask if you politely, if you could mute yourself during the presentation today, just so there's no interruptions for Hinnas. And if you want to keep your video on, that's absolutely fine, not a problem at all. There will be a quick Q&A section at the end, and you can obviously pop your camera back on and take yourself off mute and ask any questions that you want. But if you want to, during the presentation, and you have a burning question that you need to ask really quickly, you can just pop that in the chat function just at the bottom of your screen, that you should be able to see there. I think that's everything for today. So Hinesh, it's over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that introduction, Laura. And also thank you for the invitation. Hopefully you should see my screen now. Someone can give me a quick nod. That would be appreciated. Yes, excellent. Thank you. So, yeah, good afternoon, Hinesh. I work for the West Midlands Cyber Resilience Centre. I'm also a currently serving officer for West Midlands Police too. I've been sort of in policing now for about 17 years. I've done various different roles, but in the main, I've specialised in technology. We've looked at open source investigation, cell site analysis, digital forensics, and most recently, my role has been as a DI on the regional cybercrime unit. So I've got a fairly good understanding of sort of the crimes that are affecting the region. I've been on there for about 2 years, and then I saw a chance for a secondment to the Cyber Resilience Centre, which is where I am at the minute. I'll be talking a little bit more about that later, but in summary, you know, police officer, I've always been interested in technology, and today is a really good chance for me to sort of go through a bit of advice, a few tips on how to protect yourself online. So we'll be covering a few things today. The presentation will be about half an hour, 40 minutes. I'll be covering the current cyber landscape. You know, where are we currently with everything that's going on? I'll talk about what law enforcement can do to help you and the various services available. Talk about the history of cybercrime, how we've got to where we are. I'll talk about a few current threats, hopefully with some practical steps that you can take to protect yourselves. I'll then do a case study just to show the impact of one of the threats that are still quite prevalent. And then I'll end off by talking about the Cyber Resilience Centre and the services that it offers. So, what is a threat? Well, you can see some stats there on the screen. You've got the fact that the digital economy is worth £400 million per day. 80% of cyber attacks start in the supply chain. There's £130 billion lost to consumers annually. Now, all these stats, they're large, big numbers, and they are getting bigger. The threat to cybercrime isn't going away. It's only getting bigger. And we need to sort of work together to stop this. Recognising the importance of cybercriminality, the government have actually classified cybercrime as being a tier 1 national security threat.
Oh yeah,
that's the same level as terrorism. So it just goes to show you how importantly the government actually views cybercrime and its impact on the UK. You can see there 3 headlines from the press. And I won't go into too much detail there, but needless to say that almost nowadays a week doesn't go by without a cyber attack headline. The most recent one being the attack on the pipeline in America and the results from that. So we need to work in partnership with people. We need to work together because the problem is quite large. You know, I always talk about the fact that if I was to treble my old team and I was to put everyone on 24-hour working shifts, we still wouldn't scratch the surface of this. Why is that? Well, 2 reasons. Firstly, the volume of cybercrime is so large. And number 2 is the fact that this cybercrime takes place without any geographic boundaries. It can be in any country in the world. And some of these countries are not very friendly with the UK. So if I was to find an offender there, I can't just knock on the door and arrest them. So this is a really big problem. We need to work together with partners, and it's not something we can arrest our way out of. So just a little bit of a quote here. It's a little bit old now, so 4 or 5 years old, but it's still really relevant to what we're trying to do with the Cyber Resilience Centre and the police. And it says that this cyber arms race is likely to be an enduring challenge, And an effective response requires collaborative action from government, law enforcement, industry regulators, and critically business leaders. And this is really why I'm here today. This is why you will find available police officers to support you and the CRC. So how does law enforcement look in the UK? Who is there to help you? We've got three main agencies, and you can see them down the middle column there. You've got the National Crime Agency. Their role is to coordinate law enforcement. They will have intelligence and they will coordinate responses based on that intelligence. You've then got the Regional Organised Crime Unit, which is where I've come from. And we are a collaboration of 4 different police force areas, and that's West Midlands, Staffordshire, Warwickshire, and West Mercia. And the idea behind our team is to look at the organised criminal aspect of cybercriminality, which would probably surprise you in the scale of things. There are organised crime groups right now in our communities across the world making considerable sums of money from committing cyber acts. And they're the people that we will focus mainly on. And then the last team there are individual force teams, hence why I've got West Midlands Police there. So each force now has its own dedicated cyber team too. And their role is to look at the more volume aspects of cybercrime, whether that's investigating phishing emails, whether that's investigating social media account takeovers. They will look at the more sort of volume level of cybercrime, which I'm sure everybody on this call has been affected by. So they're the 3 law enforcement agencies, but you've also got support from other bodies as well. So the first one there is the National Cybersecurity Centre. And they are, as it says there, a part of the GCHQ. And they are the technical spy masters for the UK. They give us information and advice on how to keep people safe, and we will then promote those messages. They also provide us with technical notice. So should they see that a company is under attack, they will give us some information on there. We will knock the door of that company and tell them, say, just to let you know, if you don't know already, this IP range here has been infected by malware. You may want to go away and have a look at that. So we work very closely with them on the skill sets that they have. Then the newest kid on the block is the Cyber Resilience Centre for West Midlands. I'll talk a lot more about that later, but in essence, the whole purpose of the CRC, the Cyber Resilience Centre, is to protect small and medium businesses. So I want to talk a little bit now about the history and the development of cybercrime. How have we got to where we are today? And I start this talk off by asking a question to the audience. I usually do this in person. It's not the same as on a Zoom meeting, but I'll ask the question anyway. And that is this. So this is a cereal box, an American cereal box. And I always ask the question from people, what does this cereal box have to do with cybersecurity and the development of cybercrime? At this stage, I usually get some quite weird and wonderful answers, all of them quite thoughtful, but no one really gives the right answer. And I always give a bit of a clue at this stage and ask the audience if they have any Apple devices at home or at work. They've got an iPhone, an iPad. And if I gave you the clue to say that cereal box was responsible for you having that iPhone, would that be a clue? Again, I get even more strange looks at this stage, and I talk through how we got to where we are with hackers. So the hackers actually came from a community in America. These were people who enjoyed computing and getting into them and understanding how they worked. And that sort of tied together with the time that consumer devices were entering people's home for the first time. Televisions, washing machines, etc. And this group of people would break them apart and try and figure out how they worked, and then they would try and put them together. So they would try and use a television remote control to operate a train set, for example. And that they literally hacked together bits of technology. That's where the phrase hacking actually comes from. Now, there was a subset of these hackers called phreakers, and they were phone hackers. And they would try and see how the phone system and the network work together and what they could do to try and get into the systems. One of these chaps, a guy called Joe Ingratian, and he was blind, and he discovered that by whistling a certain frequency down the handset of a payphone, it allowed him to make free phone calls, which in the 1970s was relatively expensive. So this knowledge became quite common within the hacking and phreaking community. That frequency 2600 hertz was noted many places, and people tried to see how they could hack phone boxes. At the same time, there was another chap in the community called John Draper, and he discovered there was a whistle in that serial box that I showed you earlier. And guess which frequency it played? 2600 hertz. So these serial boxes started flying off the shelves because people could use these whistles and make free phone calls from payphones. His nickname became Captain Crunch. So there were two students at the same time who knew all about this, and they created an electronic version of that whistle, a frequency generator, to play that exact same frequency, and they called it a blue box. And they started selling it around campuses in America to students who were probably away from home, and I think they charged about $100 a piece. Now, those two guys there on the right, one's called Steve Wozniak and the other one's called Steve Jobs. And the money that they gained from selling those blue boxes created the startup capital for Apple computers. And the reason why I point that story out is you can see the link between how hacking actually affects technology and how that curiosity could actually work for good or for evil. And if you look at a quote here from Steve Wozniak, he says that he called only to explore the phone company's system, to learn the codes and tricks. He was pure, but then he realized that others were not so pure and they were just trying to make money. So for the first time, you saw real monetization of hacking techniques. We then moved towards the 1980s, back to the UK, and we see there was a system called Prestel. Now, Prestel was a box you could buy from BT, British Telecom. You could plug it into your TV, and it allowed you access to information. And you can see a screenshot there. It looks very similar to CFAX or Teletext, if people remember that. And you could look at news, business news, holiday, accommodation, all that sort of stuff that you can see on there. So it was quite a good forward-thinking system. And there were two journalists at the time, Robert Shafee and Steve Gold, and they were at a trade show where BT was selling this kit, trying to show all the things it could do. And they actually had a look over the shoulder of an engineer who was working on the system, and they saw that he had the username of all the twos and a password of 1234. So they saw straight away this is a really poor password. But they went home, logged onto their Prestel terminals, they tried that username and password, and they got in. Not only did they get in, but they got into a test server which had an exact copy of the main live database, and they could see across the whole Prestel network. Now, one of the things about Prestel was it had a really early version of email, so it was really forward thinking. So if I was a Prestel user and I knew another Prestel user, I could send them an email. So they had a look at the system and scanned across all the inboxes, and they found an email inbox belonging to this chap, the Duke of Edinburgh. And they could have a look at all his emails and see what he was writing to other people. At that stage, they thought to themselves, you know what, we've done enough now. We've identified this as a security breach. We need to let BT know. So they gave them a call and said, just to let you know, your security engineers are employing really poor practices. Can you get them to change it? So BT took the information. What did they do? Did they give some training to their staff? They talked to them about strong password policies? No, they called the police. They called the Met. And we saw this information. We thought, well, we can't let this group get away with getting in this much information. So we went and arrested them. We locked them up and we charged them with forgery under the Forgery and Counterfeiting Act of 1981. And they were convicted of this at court. Now, what they did is they took their case to the Court of Appeal and said, look, we have done something. You're absolutely right. But what we've done doesn't fit the crime that you've charged us with, because there was no legislation at the time whatsoever that fitted computer hacking. So the Court of Appeal agreed, and they were acquitted of that offence. And that made the government of the day create the Computer Misuse Act in 1990, which is still the predominant bit of legislation that we use. We then sort of moved towards the late 90s and the early 2000s, and we see the internet entering people's homes for the first time. We see the rise of bulletin boards, where people are openly talking about hacks and exploits and how to use them. We find carding sites where people are openly selling credit card information. And we also see the rise of computer viruses. So that brings us to the modern day, and I'll talk through now some current threats. The first one I want to talk about is phishing. And you'll see many different names that phishing is described as. You'll see phishing, vishing, business email compromise. Don't worry too much about the actual terminology, other than the fact that it's usually an email or a phone call purporting to be from somebody else. These happen all the time. I get loads in my inbox, and I'm sure you will get many as well. Now, usually find that the English in them is quite poor. We'll laugh at the grammar, and we'll usually delete them and get on with our day. The problem is that these emails are getting better. They're getting more sophisticated, and they're being a lot more clever about how they're actually deploying these emails. So I'll give you an example now of one that I had in my inbox, and I'd ask you to have a look at it and tell me if you can spot anything on there which indicates to you that this could be fake. So here it is. And this is an email that I say, real life one landed in my personal inbox. It's a few years old now, but I think it's still relevant to show you how good these hackers actually are. So as I say, at this stage, I usually ask people, can they spot anything on there? And I get some answers back. The first one people always say is, there is no name on there. A lot of times now, banks will put your name on there to say, you know, for example, for me, it'd be, dear Mr. Mehta, we've got some information for you, whatever it might be. However, not all banks do that. So it's not an automatic sign to say that it's not a genuine email. But let's actually have a look at this email and see what it says. So it says that, please note, starting from March 13th, we'll be introducing new online authentication procedures in order to protect the information of online banking users. And they talk about the fact that they're introducing a two-factor authentication and a security question. It says you are required to confirm your personal details with us, or you won't be able to use your account until that's done. And they give you a link to click on. And it says once you've done that, you'll have full access to your account. So this email is telling me that they want to keep me protected. So why would I doubt this being a genuine email? If you look at the actual email itself, the English is quite good. There's no issues with the grammar. And at the bottom, there is actually a clip. So you can see there's a little embedded YouTube clip. It says it takes 2 minutes to protect yourself online. If I was to click on that, it would take me to a glossy IBM security video. So again, the running theme throughout this email is all around my personal security. So why would it be fake? Right, so if you have a look at this email then, the first thing you want to do is try and identify if it's genuine. And the first thing people point out is, well, it says from NT West, it doesn't have the A in there, so it must be fake. Now, actually, the people who constructed this email have done that very deliberately. And that's because one of the biggest webmail providers out there is Gmail, owned by Google. And NatWest will pay Google a certain amount of money every year to make sure that everything shown as NatWest has to go through a filter first. And if it doesn't go through that filter and match on their genuine email addresses, it gets knocked out. So they could have put that as being NatWest. They could have put the A in there quite easily, but they chose not to. Why? Because Google Mail is one of the biggest email providers. So they took the risk, actually, you know, I don't want to cut out a massive chunk of my customer base, but I'll take the A out there instead so they don't notice it. So that's the first thing that shows me that this is not a genuine email. The A is missing. But what does that mean? I can put that to be anything I want. I could put that in blue to be Hinesh. But what is the real email address that sits behind that? Well, let's have a look. So while it says NT West, the real email address that it comes from is here. And it's where it says other. And you can see there it's got i.9799@caquetiolo.com. Is that like to be a genuine NatWest email address? And the answer is obviously no. It's actually a Brazilian hosting company. And they've probably used some false credit card details, usually bought some hosting space to spam out people en masse. So that's a really big warning sign. This is not from NatWest. And our advice at that stage is to delete the email. Don't carry on forward with it. The advice I always give to people, if you get an email from your bank, is have a read of it. If it's a genuine email, it will show up if you go into your app or if you log on through a website. So delete the email. Go onto the app, go onto the website, and if it's a genuine message, it will show up in there also. Do not click links is my advice to you. But obviously, being curious about this email, trying to see where it's come from, I did click the link. Don't do it, but I did it myself. And this is where it takes me. It takes me to here. So whenever I show this slide, I get a few giggles in the room because quite obviously this is now a fake email. Why? Because the URL bar at the top says www.natwest.com, right? So it's obviously not from NatWest. But I give the answer back to people. If you're on a mobile phone and you scroll down on the screen, what actually happens to the bar at the top? It goes off the screen. They want to maximize user experience. They take that off. So again, would you or would people necessarily spot that? What about if you're in a rush? What if you're vulnerable? Would you necessarily spot that as a fake email? And then what's the rest of the page? Well, to me, that looks really good. It's using the right font, the right colors. There's nothing wrong with the English. It looks like a genuine website. They've even gone a few steps further. So firstly, you can see there's a padlock in the URL bar again. And for years, we used to say to people, look for that padlock because it means it's secure. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean anything anymore. You can actually spoof that relatively easily nowadays. So whilst the padlock helps you, do not believe it's 100% genuine just because the padlock is there. You can see that in this example today. And the next bit that makes me think this is quite sophisticated is the fact that this is a mobile-enabled web page. So if I go to this same web page using my computer and using Safari or Chrome, that'll give me a different version of this web page. So the hackers have actually been that sophisticated to make a version specifically for a mobile phone. And in fact, the mobile phone that I own, which is an iPhone at this time. So again, you can see the sophistication that takes place behind doing phishing emails. It's still one of the major forms of attacks and leads on to other attacks, which I'll talk to you about in a second. But please be mindful of emails and email addresses. Make sure your password is really secure to access emails, because that's the key to a lot of your other services. Next one we'll talk about now is ransomware. So this is a really big problem for us right now. It was on the news just last week. And in fact, the energy pipeline attack that's taking place currently, that was also a ransomware attack. So what is it? Ransomware is a piece of software that a user will have inadvertently downloaded, okay? Perhaps by a phishing email like the one I showed you earlier. Now that software will sit there silently on your computer, and what it will do is slowly work its way through all your files, photographs, spreadsheets, Word documents. And what it does is it locks each file down individually. It will only allow you access to get those files back if you put a certain code or certain key into the piece of software. If you don't put that in there, that's going to cause you a problem. Now, that has and continues to shut down businesses, and then at that stage they will ask for a ransom. And let's have a look at the screenshot that's on the screen now. So it says, oops, your files have been encrypted. This is a genuine screenshot, and this is the same one that affected the NHS attack that took place in 2017. It says you can decrypt some of your files for free. Try now by clicking here, but if you want to decrypt all your files, you will need to pay. You only have 3 days to make the payment. After that, the price will be doubled. After you don't pay in 7 days, you won't be able to recover your files. It says, how do I pay? And it talks about payment via Bitcoin, because they believe this to be an anonymous form of currency, so they can't be caught. They say send the correct amount to the address specified below. And once the payment is checked, you can start decrypting your files. Contact. If you need our assistance, send a message by clicking here. They even have their own customer services department, because this is big business to them. So this is what happens, and people look at this and they will panic, and there's very little chance to get your computers running. Now, I'd ask you the question, if tomorrow all your computers were locked down and had this screenshot, what would that mean? If you could never retrieve those files again, how could you operate? The key to this is having regular backups. Make sure you have clean backups that are held separately to your main backups, and that include all the relevant information that you can use to get back up and running quickly. But as I said, this same ransomware WannaCry was used on the NHS a few years ago, and you can see some numbers there. 53% of UK trusts were affected. Half the NHS was affected by this ransomware attack. 1,200 pieces of diagnostic equipment were affected, 19,000 cancelled appointments, and there's £92 million cost to the NHS back then. I only dread to think what would happen if this had happened during COVID. It doesn't bear thinking about. Now, the FBI have analysed the language that was used on WannaCry, and they actually attributed that to a group based in North Korea, a group called the Lazarus Group. And I could do a whole different webinar on this group, that they are a collection of hackers, arguably state-sponsored, and they committed a number of hacks around the UK, around the world, including one of the biggest, well, the biggest ever bank robbery, which was $81 million stolen from the Bangladeshi Central Bank. They're also arguably responsible for the Sony Entertainment breach that took place, if people remember that, a few years ago, where emails were leaked, where films were also leaked. And one of the main people behind that is this chap called Park Jin-hyuk, and that's pictured now on the left. He is wanted by the US authorities, so if you see him, please give the police a call. So that just goes to show the scale of ransomware and phishing. I'll now sort of demonstrate some of these risks by going through a case study for a job that my old team worked on, and this was called Operation Array. And I'll just go through some of this and just ask you to think about how your company would react should you face this same situation. So who was the victim? It's a multinational engineering firm. They are based in the region. They have 2,000 employees, so a very large firm, but they're based all across the world. They used multiple systems in their business, right from communication to handling their core business as well. A set of disparate systems with some security policy incoherence, but not so much. Now, what happened with this company was, in January 2017, they noticed some information had been deleted from their servers. they had some what's called DLP, some data loss prevention software, and it flagged up to their IT departments some data had been deleted off the server. So they looked into this and they're a little bit worried, but thought, well, you know what, the impact isn't that large. We don't need to worry too much. And they carried on with their business. They carried on working and they noticed nothing had changed at all. So they were relatively happy. If there'd been a breach, it was relatively minor. We then get to March now in the same year, and the IT director receives this text message on his phone. A very scary message, I'm sure you'll agree. It says, we have all your company data. We have control of your network. We have control of all your phones. The IT director looks at this, he goes into work, and everything in the message is absolutely spot on. Can't access his computers, can't get access to his phones, and the text message is absolutely correct in what it says, and he starts panicking. He contacts the police. He gets his IT department to have a look and see what's going on, and they notice now that the deletion that's taken place is a lot more severe, so that 60 to 80% of their UK operations are unable to operate. It's not a good time at all. So when this sort of attack happens, you want to do two things. The first thing you want to do is rebuild your old systems. You want to get up and running because you're losing business. And there's a whole issue about reputation damage as well. So they started to do that. At the same time you're trying to rebuild your systems, what you also want to try and do and try and find is where the attack has taken place from. Because if you rebuild your systems and it'll just bring the same problem back in, that could be an issue. But that's exactly what they did. They tried to find out what happened and try and rebuild their systems. So we then got brought in at this stage, and we're having a look through their logs. We're having a look to see what actually occurred before this attack. And we noticed that access has been made through a piece of software called TeamViewer. And TeamViewer is what we call a remote access tool, or a RAT. And all that does is it's on your computer and allows somebody else to remote into your computer. So you may have had that with IT departments where you might have had a problem, say, I can't get this working. And then the engineer will say, okay, you need to allow me access. You'll click OK. And suddenly you see your mouse moving because someone else has got remote access into your computer. And that's what a remote access tool is. Completely legitimate and has no unless it's used for bad, it's a completely legitimate bit of software that's out there to help businesses. But we noted this tool is the one that's been used to delete information. At this stage, we have a look at the IP address and we try and see where's this IP address come from? Where has this malicious actor logged on from? An IP address is just merely a telephone number for where that person's called in from, so it helps us locate them. And we noticed an address, and I've had to delete the real location, but I've used the town of Sanford. So at this stage, we know that the attack is probably from a town called Sanford. While we're doing this, of course, the company's trying to rebuild its systems, and they are in proper panic mode. Why? They have no clean backups. Desperation is now sinking in. Their management board are really worried about them never, ever be able to rebuild their systems to the level that it was just the day before. They're panicking so much that they start to contact old IT employees, ex-employees, sorry, to see if anybody has a copy of a clean backup that they could give so we could get our systems back up and running. That's how desperate they actually were. So as this is going on, there's a few things that are running in parallel as well. So the company calling our ex-IT staff, and they call one person, says, oh, actually, I do have a clean backup. So we're thinking that's really good news. But they start asking money for this clean backup, which is a very strange thing to do. And we think, well, why is he asking for money? And then he changes his mind. It was all a bit of a weird conversation, as reported from the police and the person that called him. So it starts raising our suspicions slightly. We now notice this chap also currently works in Sanford. Okay, so my policeman's alarm bell is thinking, oh, this is a really suspicious character. At the same time, the number 199 becomes really, really important to this investigation. And if anybody remembers what 199 was, it's the number that was linked to the original text message, which is here. Now, 199 is actually an SMS provider. So I, as a user, can sign up for an account, and I can then send SMSs, and they will then forward them on. And that's where this came from. So we go to the company that provides this service, and we give them the information that we have. And they give us an address again in Sanford now. So all the jigsaw pieces all now fitting together, and we're getting really, really suspicious. We go to magistrate court and we ask for a warrant against this person. Say, look, this is all the information that we have. We believe this person has attacked the network belonging to this company. We need to go there straight away, stop the attack, and hopefully recover some evidence for prosecution. The magistrate agrees. We get a search warrant. So we go around to the address on 23rd of April, and this is what we see. So this is a relatively well-to-do IT manager, has a very nice house. And one of the first things we spot is a laptop that's wrapped in a towel in his walk-in wardrobe. Very strange place to keep a laptop. I don't keep my laptop there. I'm sure most people on this call don't either. So that's one of the first laptops we took away with us, and we started to examine. We start to interview the chap, and he says to us, "Don't know what you're talking about. Yes, I used to work for that company. Yes, I had the call with them about giving them the backup back, and the fact that, I was going to charge somebody. I just thought that I would have to go through it, so I needed some money for the time that I was going to spend looking for it." We don't believe a word of what he says, and we start to examine the computer. And what do we find on it? One of the most telling signs of anybody's mindset is their search history, and this is the search history for this chap. So if you uninstall TeamViewer, does this delete logs? Is that good evidence for what we're claiming has happened? Yeah, it is. How to damage a computer without evidence? Again, some really good evidence. Disgruntled employee revenge. Well, if that doesn't show you his mindset, I don't know what does. And the best one was how to delete search history on Google. Clearly, he didn't research that well enough, because we could pull off his history straight away. We took all that to the court despite his non-guilty plea, and he was convicted of that offence. This is Samir Desai. Of Streetley. He was charged under Section 2 of the Computer Misuse Act, which we spoke about earlier. He received a 15-month suspended sentence and a £20,000 fine. Now, the reason why I use this case is to highlight one of the other threats, which is around insiders. Insider threat is quite serious, because usually people know how your systems work. They know what to attack. They know some of the passwords. So it remains a threat, particularly for big businesses. So please bear that in mind. We had a big conversation about this result when it came in, because the thoughts were actually this sentence was quite low compared to what he'd done. He'd shut that business down for weeks and weeks, and it cost them millions of pounds. But when you look at it in the cold light today, he's unlikely ever to be able to work in the IT sector again without conviction. He was given a £20,000 fine. So, despite him being relatively well off, that would still hurt. So whilst we would have wanted more as police officers, we were sort of okay with it in the end. So there are sort of three main threats I want to talk about today. How can we actually help you? I'm going to finish off by just talking about the West Midlands Cyber Resilience Centre. So what is it? The Cyber Resilience Centre has been formed as a combination of the public sector and the private sector to help small and medium businesses. And this because our research shows that SMEs are really confused where to turn to for cybersecurity advice. Many companies don't actually realise they have a digital presence. An example I'll give here is a cake shop. They would not ordinarily consider themselves to be involved in the digital world, but they are. They will be taking payment usually by credit card, so they'll have to obey PCI DSS standards. They might have CCTV in the shop. They'll probably be using some cloud-based software to upload HR and payroll things. So despite them not thinking that, they are, and they hold information which is valuable to people. One of the biggest shifts we found in the last 5 years is hackers moving away from your big companies to your smaller companies. Why? Because their security posture is just not as good enough as the big companies. They don't have IT departments. They don't have a standing army of professionals to come and help them when it goes wrong. And they usually don't have the resources to put the wheel back on should it all go wrong. So it's been recognised by criminals, and the increase in attacks on SMEs has been quite large, hence why government have created the CRC to try and help in this space. So you can see it stat there, 43% of all cyber attacks are targeted at small businesses. And I think that number is actually bigger. The threat from cybercrime is real and growing. Now, what do we do? One of the first things we offer to all businesses is free core membership. Please sign up with this. I'll give you the URL at the end. It costs nothing. With that, you'll get free regular advice and information on what the current threats and trends are. You'll get a sit down with one of us, probably me, and I'll talk through in a non-biased way what your IT systems are and where you might want to help yourself. You'll have access to NCSC guidance. We talked about the NCSC earlier. So how you can stay protected. We'll give you access to a tool called Exercise in a Box, which allows you to self-test where you are. We'll use if you're a slightly bigger company, we'll have toolkit for you, and you'll have access to a regular newsletter that we will send you via MailChimp. So please sign up to this. It costs you nothing. It's just a really good tool to stay safe online. This is just a bit of testimonial from somebody who isn't one of our core members, and you can read it for yourself, but they are really, really pleased with what we are doing and how we are progressing. And the last bit, well, the second bit, what we do is really encourage the take-up of something called Cyber Essentials. If you haven't heard of Cyber Essentials before, it's a government-backed scheme, and it's a benchmarking exercise against your IT to see how safe you are. It's relatively inexpensive compared to some other cyber consulting services. As I said at the start of this, we have a lot of SMEs that are confused into where to turn to. Come and ask us. We're a non-profit organisation. Come and say to us, I'm interested in Cyber Essentials. We'll put you in touch with one of our trusted partners in the region to make sure that you get the right advice and services that you need. And the last bit of what we're trying to do with the CRC is what we call student cyber services. So we have joined up with several local universities, and we are working with students in their second or third year of cybersecurity degrees. We are training them up, and then we're offering them out to businesses to do one of these services at a much cheaper rate than would be the case if you were to go to the private sector. The idea behind this is to increase the talent pipeline that is in cyber. There is a massive lack of skills in this area in the UK and in the world, in fact. So what we want to do is try and work together with these universities, try and create students that go out into business who not only have the academic knowledge, but also the real life business experience. So I won't go through all those services there. You can read them, but ultimately all they're trying to do is help you. We offer some paid services as well, so you can think about your own business and which services would you best like. And by taking one of the sort of packaged memberships, it allows you access to a lot more. We've had a code today to use for services, so it's 10% off student services or paid membership by using that code. Please take advantage of that, or speak to me and join up as a core member. We can talk you through it. But what I will say is we're passionate about helping SMEs in this region. We want to keep you safe. We're not here to try and make loads of money. That's not what we're trying to do. But we see this gap. The gap is going to get bigger, and whatever we can do to help you, we will try and do. But that brings my presentation to a close. Hopefully that's been useful to you. I've talked through a range of different threats there. Hopefully I haven't used any technical jargon. If I have, email me and tell me off. But there's my email address. There's the URL. Please sign up to free core membership there. I'm on LinkedIn as well, so please add me. But hopefully today's been a little bit useful, and I'll pass you back over to 2 seconds.
Thank you so much, Hinesh. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. And really useful, actually, especially in the current climate. So it's only going to get worse, I imagine. So not in a bad way, but it's only going to get they're going to get more savvy with what they do, I imagine, in the future. Just before Hinesh goes, just want to check if there's any questions. I noticed there's a couple of questions in the chat, but I think some of your lovely colleagues, Hinesh, have just jumped in and sort of asked any of them. Has anybody got any questions that haven't been answered so far, or new questions that they've got for us today?
I'm happy to take any questions on the case study or any bits of policing that we're trying to do. But yeah, please ask away, or you've got my contact details. But ask now if you want to, no issues at all.
Well, Ben's just popped something in the chat, Hinesh, about the police cyber alarm service.
Thank you, Ben. That is well timed. I promise I didn't pay Ben to ask that question. So this is a new service that we've very, very recently launched in the last couple of weeks, and it is a free service that we're offering. So what is it? Police Cyber Alarm is a bit of software that is really easy to install for businesses. And what it does is it will sit on your network as a collector, and it will monitor anybody that's trying to access your network. If it notices that a certain malicious actor is trying to get in, it will try and notify you of that, and you'll get regular reports on what the state of your network is and who is trying to attack you. It's a completely free service that we're offering, and the idea behind what we're trying to do is actually collect what the landscape looks like in the UK for business. Who is trying to attack us? And therefore, how can we then build up some resilience against them? You're absolutely right to point out, Ben, and I will talk about that more as it develops. But if you have any more questions about it, please let me know. Say free service, we'll get it onto you. Contact me, contact Danielle. I see she's talking in the chat group as well, and we'll help you get through that process. Thank you.
Fantastic, brilliant. I just noticed a couple of you as well have joined without a name today. So you've joined with an unusual name that we haven't seen registered for the webinar today. We're going to be sending out some free stuff and probably some of the links that are useful to you guys just to sort of help support your business, some of the free stuff that you can get. So just wanted just a couple of you that haven't used sort of your name or haven't registered via the Chamber website. Could you just pop your details in the chat just so we can make sure that you get sort of all the links, etc., to everything, just at the bottom of the chat if you haven't done so. If not, you can email me and I will pop my details just in the chat now, just in case you want to email me for anything in particular. Just pop that in now, if I can spell. Brilliant, fantastic. Just in case anybody does, I can just see a couple of people have. Brill. Okay, I don't think we've got any more questions. Hinesh, thank you so much for today and such a brilliant presentation as well. Thank you so much. Like I have said, this has been recorded today, so a recording will be sent to you afterwards as well, should you need to watch it afterwards if you missed any of it or popped out at all. I just want to thank you again, Hinesh, and thank you for all of you that are attending. Please don't forget that we run webinars pretty much every day at the Chamber, so if you are looking for anything sort of in particular to look at, and we also have a webinar library, please don't hesitate to have a look on our website and visit us for some more webinars. But for the now, Hinesh, thank you very much, and everybody else, thanks ever so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.